Hello Fude friends, this video is a comprehensive overview and review of the entire Chikuhodo Kazan Homare or Honor series. I purchased the entire set and have now had over 3 months to use the brushes. I provide an overview of the entire set, review each brush in detail, provide size comparisons, compare to different hair types, and conclude with my final review and how they compare to other Chikuhodo brushes. When the Honor series was first announced, I immediately knew I wanted to purchase all of the brushes and placed an order. This decision was influenced by 3 factors. The first being that I could see myself using all of the brushes in the set. I was happy to see the series did not include an eyebrow or lip brush, which Chikuhodo tends to include in their sets and I already have too many of. Second reason is that it was face brush heavy. Face brushes are my weakness, and this set included 5 of them. And the last reason was the brush designs and overall aesthetic. The exposed wood handle, the engraved details, and the premium hair type truly spoke to me. Let's get into the details of the set. The set includes 8 brushes, all made from Kazan Squirrel and Granadillo wood handles. Kazan Squirrel, is also referred to as brown squirrel, is a premium squirrel hair type. It is described by Chikuhodo as a very rare squirrel hair. The delicate, soft, slightly wavy hair is excellent in powder. On the Hakuhodo website, Kazan hair is described as, again, very rare and of high value. Kazan squirrel hair is similar to blue squirrel, but even softer and finer in texture. The hair color is between a medium and dark brown. It reminds me of milk chocolate with a little chestnut reddish brown hint. Depending on the light, you can see the red hint and a little golden highlight. It is a dark brown hair color, but it is lighter than what we're used to seeing with blue and gray squirrel. In terms of softness, Kazan feels softer than blue or gray squirrel. In the softness survey ratings, I would give it a 5, making the Honor series one of the softest readily available hair squirrel type brushes. By this I mean that the series is not limited edition. The handle has a shape that tapers towards the bottom and then comes to a flat bottom. Like other Chikuhodo brushes, the handle feels a little lightweight, but not so much that it doesn't feel luxurious. And overall, it is heavier than what we're used to with the Z series or FO series. It is nice to hold, luxurious, and balanced. And then it has this glossy black ferrule, similar to the Z series. The wood is a tropical hardwood with origins from Mexico, Central America, and the Brazilian Amazon region. It's prized for its reddish brown color with distinct stripes, which you can certainly see on the brushes. It has these darker reddish brown vertical lines going down the length of the handle, which complements the hair color. And Granadillo wood is heavy and a high quality wood. And then last thing about the handles is this doesn't feel like it's been finished. So the wood feels exposed, showing the natural wood gradient and giving it a more traditional look. And the color of the wood is, I would say, a medium brown. I will put it next to the P8 handle, which is an ebony wood handle. And you will clearly see that the ebony wood is a dark, dark brown. And then length of these handles is the same as the Z series. And the one thing that is different is that they added engraving to the handles, which you can feel. And I think the engraving is very elegant and well executed and helpful. You don't have to worry about either the brand name or the brush number fading over time. overall I find the handles to look and feel extremely elegant. Let's start deep diving into each of the brushes, starting with the KZ1 powder brush. Here is the brush. This is the largest brush in the series, and it's priced at 26,000 Japanese yen, making this one of the most expensive, actually the most expensive in the set, at approximately $250. Note from Chikuhodo is that the powder brush uses long raw hair, which is rarely distributed and it's an extremely rare brush. So for me, this helps justify the price to know that I purchased a brush made from more rare bristles. Hakuhodo does have Kazan brushes, but they're much smaller, so I saw this as an opportunity for me to pick up a large face brush made from Kazan hair. So let me get back into the bristles of the brush. Here is the front view, side, and top. It has a standard oval ferrule that we have seen from Chikuhodo, and it is an oval brush head, similar to the MK brushes. The hair length is 48 millimeters, longer than the Z1, which is 45, but shorter than the MK2, which is 52 millimeters. So density, it's hard to describe. I will try my best. So overall, the brush feels like medium density, but I think that is because the hairs are long and very fine, that near the top of the brush, it feels airy and of medium density, but the brush is very densely packed at the bottom. So I'll push against the hairs and you can see there are absolutely no gaps in the ferrule when I push the hairs to the side. So it is densely packed, but because the hairs are so fine, the density begins to feel more airy near the tip of the brush head. So the hairs are very fine, and I found that they didn't blossom much. Also keep in mind that I keep my brushes in guards or plastic sleeves when they're not used, or after washing I will try to shape them into basically the shape they came in, and that's how I personally store mine. But either way, after using them, they didn't blossom very much. And let's get into some comparisons, starting with the ones that I think are the most similar in size and shape. And as I already mentioned, the MK2 has that similar oval shape. I will show both up close. Here's the front view, side view, and top view. The bristles are a bit longer on the MK2, but not that noticeable, especially when being used. The density, I would say, is the same, but the Kazan does feel more airy and soft. And I'll take this moment to note that my MK2 is extremely soft, yet the KZ1 is a bit softer. I think this is very crucial to note because my MK2 is older from years ago, that I'm afraid newer versions of it may not be as soft, whereas this Kazan brush from 2020 is softer than what I consider to be a very soft Squirrel Chikuhodo brush. My last observation about the Kazan is that I feel it has less spring than Gray Squirrel. By spring, I mean the bristles' resistance when you move it around and its tendency to bounce back to where it was. So I'll try to demonstrate. If I run my fingers through the Kazan, let me put that one on the side. If I run my fingers through the Kazan, I feel like I can just push the hairs with very little resistance. And if I do the same thing with the Gray Squirrel, I find that the hairs have a little more spring. They kind of bounce back to where they were. And again, when pushing against it, I feel a little more resistance when compared to the KZ. So the takeaway there for me is that as you use it on your face, the Kazan bristles will feel softer because the resistance against your skin is lower. The next comparison is the Chikuhodo P8. This is from their premium series and quite expensive. I'll make a dedicated review on that one because I get a lot of questions on it. Again, I would like to note that this I keep in a sleeve, so right now the bristles are compact, but after using it, and especially if you store it upright in the case it comes in, these hairs will open up and blossom more. So just wanted to make note of that when bloomed, it will look even larger. But here is a front comparison, and then side and the top. You can see that the P8 takes up a larger surface area. So the bristles on the P8 are 63 millimeters. It's a larger brush, it's heavier, it feels more substantial, and the softness I would say is equal. Density I would say is equal. In terms of performance, the longer bristles on the P8 make this brush, for me at least, a single-use brush. I find that I can only use it as a finishing brush, and you can do that with the KZ1 as well. I think if you don't mind a larger brush, you could even use the KZ1 for cheek products or bronzer products, but the P8 is just too big to do that. I think this is only suitable for all over finishing products. It's also, the bristles are much longer, so you have like less control of precise placement. All of this is to say that the KZ1 is a really strong alternative to the P8 if you have been having your eyes on a premium finishing brush with a wood handle. The KZ brush is at a lower price point. I'm happy to have both, but I can see others getting more use out of the KZ brush, that I would recommend this one first. It just feels a little bit more multi-purpose, lower price point, and it's equally beautiful. The next comparison is the Chikuhodo F01. This one is made out of silver fox bristles. It's smaller in size, both in terms of the bristle length and the ferrule size. Here is the front, side, and top view. The biggest difference between these two brushes is that Silver Fox has much more resistance and spring. What I was talking about earlier, when you press against it, you really feel the bristles and a lot more spring. But it's still very soft. The hairs quickly spring back into shape, but so you'll feel more pressure against your skin, but the pressure is still soft. Whereas with the Kazan, you really don't feel the pressure. It's much more airy. Because of this, the FO brushes have more blending and buffing powder. I don't necessarily prefer one bristle type over the other. I really enjoy both. They are just very different, and you should think about the type of products you want to use your brushes with. If you think you want to be able to buff in and blend more quickly, the FO series is great. If you want to work with more pigmented and stronger color products and create more subtle soft looks, the Kazan is virtually foolproof in my opinion. So to conclude on the powder brush, its best uses are for all over powder products, both loose and pressed products, but do keep in mind that the extreme softness of Kazan will make it hard to pick up really hard pressed products. And I think collectors and everyday users alike will enjoy this brush. If it's within your budget and you want an extremely luxurious powder brush, I highly recommend this one. Next up, I have the KZ2 cheek brush, and this one feels like a smaller version of the KZ1. So let's start by just giving an overview of this one. This one is 14,000 Japanese yen. The shape is also oval, ferruled and oval bristle head. So here is the front, side, and top view. And I will put it next to the KZ1 so you can get an idea on the size differences. The KZ2 has 45 millimeter bristles lengthwise. And then density on these two, I would say that they're the same concept, where the bottom is very dense, but as you taper towards the top, it feels airy and of medium density. Size comparisons for the KZ2, I think the closest I have is the Z Series C8, which is a cheek brush. And as you can see, they're quite similar. The Z8 has 40 millimeter hair length bristles. The ferrules to me look identical. And I also find that they perform virtually the same. So here are the different views of these. The KZ does feel a little bit more airy, but not that much. And then lastly, let's compare it to the F03. And then the F03 is a smaller brush, both in terms of the ferrule and the hair length, but it blossoms out more and again is better for buffing motions. I really like the Z2 because I think it gives you a good idea of what the hair and handle are like without splurging all the way on the powder brush. So I think this is a really good option because you can use it as a small powder brush or a classic cheek brush shape. It is going to be closer to a cheek brush in size, but it gives you a really good idea of how substantial the brushes feel, and you can have a face brush that's like a hybrid large cheek brush, small powder brush. And then the best uses for this brush, I think, are blush, bronzer, also finishing powders, as long as you're okay being patient and working area by area and not all over at once, like you would with the powder brush, the larger powder brush. And then also, if you're looking for really strong color application, this cheek brush will not work, in my opinion. It's too soft to deliver a stronger application efficiently. You're going to have to dip in and buff it in a number of times. And at that point, I think you're slightly better off with even the Z series or the FO series. But if you're looking for effortless, soft looks, these are truly exquisite. So now let's move on to the KZ3, which is a friend of the KZ2. This is another large cheek brush. They describe it as a cheek highlight brush, but it's similar in size to the KZ2 in that they both have the same bristle length of 48 millimeters. So here they are next to each other. The KZ3 has a round ferrule, whereas the KZ2 has that oval, more paddle-shaped ferrule and bristle head. The KZ3 also retails for 14,000 Japanese yen. And then lastly, let me touch on density. This one actually, to me, feels a little less dense than the last two. And when I push the hairs to the end, to the side, I get a little gap. You may not be able to see that, but there is a very small gap there. So I find this one to be slightly less dense than either the one or the two in this series. Whether that is intentional or just a bundling difference in my brush, I'm not sure. So if you have this one and want to leave that in the comments, please share with all of us. And then I haven't touched on it, but it's pretty obvious that the shape is different. And I love this shape. So the shape is more of a candle flame shape that tapers towards the top, but it doesn't taper to a very, very sharp point. The taper is so gradual, starting, I mean, even earlier than the halfway point. I feel like the hairs start to taper up to this subtle point. I really can't contain my excitement for this brush. This is one of my standout brushes from the set, mostly because of this different shape, and it's a shape I actually reach for a lot. And I have other brushes in this shape, but nothing this soft. This shape is very multi-purpose. You can use it for blush, bronzer, if you use it on its side and in sweeping motions. Can use that on your cheeks, or you can also use it for highlight with the tip. And I love this shape for setting underneath your eyes, and it's so soft, so it's perfect for the under eye area, sweeping under the eye. And again, you can still use this size for powder, especially if you don't mind working in parts, because like I said earlier, it's a similar size to the number 2. So a very versatile, multi-purpose brush. Comparisons and why I have others like it, and I'm very excited about it, is that it reminds me a lot of the Sonia G Inochigi Pro. This one is one of my all-time favorite brushes from Sonia G. Here you can see how similar they are in size and shape. The ferrule size is also similar. The Sonia G is a little more tightly packed at the ferrule, and it is more densely packed. So the Sonia G gives a stronger application, and the main difference between these two for me are the bristles are softer and more airy on the Kazan. I have a few other ones which I can show you. This is the Hakuhodo S103, and this one is dyed goat hair. The hairs are longer and it comes to a stronger point, and it also has much greater density. I would say even it's about the same as the Sonia G. And then lastly, I have the Chikuhodo G9, and this one I've had stored in a sleeve so it would blossom up a lot more. Right now it's quite compact, but again, it's another candle-like shape similar to the Inochigi and KZ3, but this one comes to a stronger point. So all of these that I previously had were some type of goat hair, and I am extremely happy to now have a softer squirrel version of it. And then I will put it next to the Z2 Chikuhodo one, just so you can get an idea of the size. It's a similar shape, but the Kazan one tapers lower down than the Z series. I don't know, I think the shape is similar in that it's candle light, but this one seems to just like blossom more in the center and then taper, whereas this one feels more straight, to me at least. And it is much smaller, so if you prefer smaller brushes, you may like the Z2. And this one is described as a highlight brush versus a cheek and highlight brush. Next, I have the KZ4 cheek brush. This one retails for 10,000 Japanese yen. As much as I like the KZ3, I think I like this one even a little bit more because this is a shape I constantly reach for, and I find this brush shape to be very user-friendly. It's a little smaller than the KZ3, so there they are next to each other. The ferrule diameter is a little smaller, and obviously the length of the bristles is shorter, but here they are next to each other to give you a size comparison. The shape of the KZ4 is a round pom-pom shape, has a round ferrule, and it is of it's highly densely packed, but again feels soft and airy. And it is a dome shape that flattens out and is less rounded near the top. The tapering happens at around the 2/3 point of the bristle length, and it's very similar to a number of other brushes that I'll show you for comparison purposes. But I'm so happy to have this brush because it's a shape I always reach for, and I'm happy to now have it in a more luxurious hair type and handle. You can use it to tap on either with the top, the side, sweep on, and then also buff in products all with one brush. So I find it very versatile and a shape that I recommend and reach for all the time myself. So the closest comparison I have is the Chikuhodo RC2, and this is a great brush that I know is enjoyed by many. I also have a slightly larger version of it, which is the Kumanofude Select Shop 2-2. And even though these are so similar, I do enjoy having the slightly different sizes of them. So the RC2 has 33 millimeter bristle lengths, the KZ4 has 35, and the Select Shop one has 39 millimeter bristle lengths. I do sound like the Goldilocks of round pom-pom squirrel brushes with these three. You certainly don't need all of them. The only slight difference I can discern is that my KZ4 feels to be more domed and a little flattened at the top, versus the RC2 feels more rounded. And I find that the tapering begins further near the bottom of the brush, whereas my Kazan one, I feel tapers closer to the top. That could just be a bundling difference, so it's really hard to say. In terms of application and use, they're going to perform virtually the same. You can achieve the same look with any of these brushes, especially if you're okay just modifying your technique ever so slightly. So you certainly don't need all three of these or even two of these. I would say that if money is not a consideration, and I know that's a big if, but if it's not, and you just want the nicest brush, I would say go with the Kazan because it does have the nicer handle and hairs. If you want a slightly larger version, go with the 2-2, although I know this one can be harder to get and you'd have to get it directly from Japan. And lastly, if you want the most cost-effective brush, go with the RC2 because this one is the least expensive and it's going to perform virtually the same, and it is still a great brush. Also great to maybe try this one, see if you like the shape, and if you do, you could always upgrade to the Kazan one. And I feel the same about the Sonia G1. This is the soft cheek. I know a lot of people enjoy this brush, and I'm going to include it here because even though it's a little different shape, the bristles are longer and the barrel diameter is smaller, it does perform the same, and you can, or similarly, not the same, you can still use it to create these very soft cheek looks. So if you like the Sonia G1 and want to upgrade to a even softer version and very luxurious wood handle version, that could be an upgrade you do, or vice versa if you really enjoy the Kazan one and want to do a goat version, which does apply a little bit more strongly. The Sonia G is a great alternative as well. So then let's get into two last comparisons, and that is the Chikuhodo T4, and then I have a dyed version of it. This is Noel collection, like a holiday version, and I wanted to put it next to the Kazan just to show how it blossoms more. So the Kazan hair I don't find blossoms out as much. We're familiar with this with Squirrel, but with the T4, even though they have a similar ferrule or same ferrule size and shape, you can see how the goat brushes tend to splay and blossom out more. And as we know, goat brushes will apply more strongly. They'll also pick up product more. So even though these are the same shape or very similar shape, they are going to perform differently. I'm going to go ahead and just rank them from the strongest application to the least strong application. So that's going to be the Kazan being the least strong, followed by the RC2, which is just squirrel hair, followed by the goat, undyed goat, and then dyed goat. So that is the ranking from least pigmented application to most pigmented application. Another way to think about it is that the Kazan is going to be best and most efficient at effortless, soft, barely there, flush of color applications, very soft and gradual. You can build it up subtly, and I don't see how you could overdo it. It's basically foolproof for soft looks. Whereas when you come over to the other side of the spectrum, this is going to deposit product more strongly. It's also going to pick up harder products more easily. So that's a good way to visualize it. And you will have to be more careful about going in too heavy-handed with these goat brushes. The last thing I wanted to compare it to is a Kazan cheek brush by Hakuhodo. This is the Hakuhodo G5518, and you can see they're very different in shape and size. The Hakuhodo one actually feels more densely packed. It feels really compact. The pom-pom is much smaller and they feel different. I find this one to be less intuitive to use for cheek products in that it just, I don't know, something about the shape doesn't mold to the contours of my face as easily as this one, and it could just be that this one splays out more and it's less densely packed, so it has a lot of added flexibility and ease. This one you have to work the brush a little stronger, but I'll make a separate review on this one. I just wanted to say that these are not redundant. They feel different, they perform different. I think they have different uses, and quite frankly, I prefer the Kazan one as a more versatile, easy to use. To conclude on the KZ4, I think you can do so much with this brush, from blush, bronzer, contour, under eye setting, buffing, blending. The list just goes on, and this is actually my go-to brush for very pigmented blushes. If you have very pigmented blushes that maybe you shy away from and don't use very frequently, a tool like this can really help you bring out those products. So this is an example. A lot of Surratt brushes are very, very pigmented, and a brush like this will help you get more use out of those types of makeup products. Moving on to the last face brush, this is the KZ5, and it's marketed and engraved on the handle as a highlighting brush. This one retails for a little bit less at 9,000 Japanese yen. Density, there are no gaps in the ferrule, so I would say densely packed. And I find the shape of this one beautiful. I know I keep saying that, but I'm a big fan of the slight changes to the designs of the bristles in this series. And this one comes to an ever so slight almond point. It is an oval ferrule, but it's still quite thick. It's not completely pinched and flat, and then has this oval and almond shape to the bristles. This one is the most skinny of all the brushes so far, so it is the smallest of the cheek brushes. And I will compare it to the KZ4 so you can get an idea of the sizes. The bristle length for these is the same on both, and that is 35 millimeters. Best uses for this one, I think it has a lot of uses. Very multi-purpose brush, and you can do so much with this classic shape. For instance, cheek products, whether that's blush, bronzer, You can also use it for highlighting because it has this smaller point, so you can use just the point to highlight, but you can also put it on its side and sweep across the areas you want to highlight. And then bigger surface area, cheek placement, I think you would want to use it flat, but you can use them however suits you best. I just know this is a very multifunction brush shape that is also enjoyed by many, and I'll show it to you with some comparisons. Oh yes, and then also powder. You can use it to put targeted powder, whether that's in your T-zone or setting underneath the eye. It's really great for under the eye because of this pointed triangular shape. You can just get really close to your eye and around your nose with this shape if you're comfortable setting with Squirrel brushes. So comparisons, the closest one I have in terms of shape is the Wayne Goss airbrush. Here they are next to each other. The Kazan one is a little bigger, and this is a great view because you can see how much wider it is, and there's significantly more hair in the Kazan one than in the Wayne Goss one. So similar shape, but not a similar size. The Kazan one also feels just more dense because it is wider, so it feels more substantial than the Wayne Goss one, which can feel flimsy is not the right word, just more flexible than the wider Kazan brush. I think it's almost 2 times as wide from the side. If you really enjoy the Wayne Goss one and want to take a large upgrade and experience something a little bit more luxurious, this would be a really nice upgrade to have 2 brushes in the shape you really enjoy. Let's also compare it to the Chikuhodo Z4. Similar size, different shape. This one is just oval shape, does not come to a point, but similar thickness. So this one is more rounded versus pointed difference. And then I also have a Hakuhodo brush. This one is the S103, and this is a beautiful brush. This one has a very similar shape. I think these are actually closer in size and shape comparison than the Wayne Goss. You can see that the ferrule width, length of the bristles, and shape are very similar in these two, and I also think the densities are similar. The S111 is actually a little more densely packed. Hard to say. I really like them both. If I had to pick one, I adore my Vermilion S series brushes, but if I had to pick one, given the price of the Vermilion series, I believe this one retails for like close to $130, and even if you don't get the Vermilion series and get the S series black handle, it's still well above $100. So just given the price alone, I'm a little more inclined to recommend the Kazan one because it is equally beautiful and elegant and functional. So really good alternative too if you've been interested in a luxury brush in this shape. And then lastly, I'd like to compare it to, well, not quite compare because they're very different, but at least give you a side-by-side with these Chikuhodo brushes. And as you can see, I store them in little plastic sleeves to help them maintain their shape. So this is a Canadian Squirrel Chikuhodo brush, and this is white Canadian Squirrel. Different shape, similar size. So I'll put them next to each other. The Chikuhodos don't have that almond shape, but they are similar size for a cheek brush, and they're a similar density. My observation of these premium Chikuhodo brushes, they're the squirrel hair type, is that the Kazan is finer The bristles are thinner and softer with less resistance than the Canadian squirrels. So the Canadian squirrels are incredibly soft, but they have thicker individual hair bristles and much more spring. So there is a difference in how they perform. The Canadian squirrel ones I find pick up more product and therefore deposit more product too, whereas the Kazan is just very soft and subtle with its application. I hope that helps distinguish a little bit on performance across different hair types. Let's move on to the eye brushes and also a few demos of the different hair types. Next up, we have the KZ6 eyeshadow brush. This one retails for 4,500 Japanese yen. Here is the front view, side and top. This one, in terms of density, I would say it is medium density. There is a little gap on the side of the ferrule when I run my fingers through it, but even though it's a medium density, it keeps its shape very well. The shape is that it has a slightly pitched ferrule. The ferrule is oval shape and it is a large paddle shape eyeshadow brush. The top is rounded and very paddle-like. We've seen these shapes from Chikuhodo before, which I will show you in a minute. The best uses for this one are, in my opinion, single eyeshadow sweeps, a large one and done type application, but you can also use this to blend around the crease, especially if you have larger eyes and don't mind using the sides of a larger brush to blend on the side in your crease. So the comparison for this one is, the closest one I have is the Chikuhodo Z5. I think they have very similar DNA, both in the ferrule size, shape, and bundling. If you're familiar with the KZ5, familiar with the Z series, Z5, you can expect a very similar performance from the Kazan eyeshadow brush. It's also similar to the F05, the Silver Fox brush. The ferrule size is the same, but the Silver Fox brush does have larger bristles and feels like a slightly larger brush. The bristles are also more stiff, so they have less flexibility and give. And then I also wanted to, so let me put them next to each other in case someone wanted to get better size comparisons. And then the last one I wanted to include is this Chikuhodo red squirrel brush. I wanted to mention this one because I think red squirrel resembles the Kazan squirrel the most in terms of softness. These feel just as soft. And also the color of the hair, the red squirrel is a hint more red, as the name would suggest, and not close in shape. This is much more pinched and flat and thin than the Chikuhodo one, but there you go. Let's move on to the next eyeshadow brush in the series, which is the KZ07 eyeshadow brush. Here they are next to each other, so you can see there was a substantial drop in size between these two. I almost wish they had included something between these two. This one, for my kind of smaller eyes, this one feels quite small, but I can get a lot of use for it. This one feels a little bit on the large side, so maybe something in between would have been nice, but that's just a matter of personal preference. So I will move on. So the KZ07, I'm sorry with the names, I'm spacing out. There's been so many brushes with so many names, I'm losing it. I can't keep it together. We're almost there. All right, the KZ07 This one retails for a little bit less, 4,000 Japanese yen. It also has this pinched oval ferrule. It's much skinnier, as you saw, compared to the larger one. And it's a more flat paddle shape. I think it's on the standard to small size for a flat shader brush with still this little round tip. Medium density, but feels very soft. And this one will be good for working around the smaller areas of your eyes or precise color placement. So best uses for this one are for soft eyeshadow formulas. Working with mattes is really pleasant. It diffuses shadows evenly and softly. And I will note that it applies colors gently, almost sheer-like. They can be built up, but you can get this more subtle sheer-like effect, which is quite pleasant. Gives you some versatility to play with your shadows, and I will demonstrate that with this brush and its comparisons. So the closest comparison is the Chikuhodo F06. Again, very close DNA in ferrule shape size, bristle shape size. The F06 again has the more firm bristles, but you can see how these will work with the same areas of your eyes. And then the other comparison I have is the Sonia G Builder Pro. This brush is one of my go-tos. I know I talk about it all the time, but I really do love it. And you can see how close they are in size and similar shape. My Sonia G tends to taper more to a point. I have received comments from some of you that yours does not, and that's just due to a bundling difference. But to me, I view these as interchangeable in terms of size. So if you reach for the Sonia G one, I think you will enjoy the size of the 07. So the Sonia G one is dyed goat, and it will apply eyeshadow more pigmentedly. So let's do a little demonstration. I'm going to start off by saying that I was pleasantly surprised by the performance of the Kazan brushes on your eyelids. I thought it would be too soft to pick up color well or work with hard press products, even special shades, that I almost didn't even want to try it. But I'm glad I had an open mind about it and did take the time to experiment with it, and truly it exceeded my expectations. I have a Pat McGrath Special Shades eyeshadow quad, which I will use for this demonstration. And the reason I chose these shadows is because they do perform really well, but they're almost this like creamy, heavy formula that is not the easiest to pick up. And so the fact that the Kazan worked with this type of shadow, I thought was really encouraging. I think it'll work well with other glittery metallic shadows too. So I'm going to go into this eyeshadow twice and then swatch it once with one sweep. So 1, 2, and you can see that it applied very subtly and then almost sheer-like. I could stop here with this finish if I was going for something so gradual and subtle, but I want to show that you can also build it up to a higher intensity. So I'm going to redo the swatch, and this time I'm going to swatch it twice with the brush to try to show that it's buildable. So 1, 2, and then 1, 2. I hope the camera catches that, but with that second application, I was able to build up the color intensity. And then I'm going to do the same with the Silver Fox right next to it, and even stronger. And then lastly, the Builder Pro, 1, 2. And then I'll do a little finger swatch. Okay, so I think from these swatches, you can see that ranking them from least strong to most strong, we have the Kazan, followed by the Silver Fox, followed by the Goat, but it's ever so gradual. I mean, from this swatch, these look almost interchangeable, and then the finger swatch was the strongest application. What I'm trying to point here is that the Kazan is more subtle but buildable, but even building it up, it's going to have the least strong application compared to Goat or other materials. Personally, I see this as a strength in that it allowed me to play with these eyeshadows in a different way, with a different finish, adding to the versatility of my eyeshadow. So yes, Pat McGrath shadows are super fun, very strong payoff, kind of like going out on the town type shadows for me because of this strong application. But I love how by using the softer brush, I'm able to play with it and just get a different intensity to the shadow. It's just so fun to play with, and I wasn't expecting it, so that was a very pleasant surprise. Highly recommend it if you want to play with Kazan. This could be a good introduction to it, given that it's at the lower price range for this collection. So let's move on to the last brush and wrap things up. The last one is the KZ8, and this is going to be a pencil-shaped brush. It comes to a point, fairly sharp, and this one retails for 4,000 Japanese yen. And here it is from the front, round ferrule from the top. I would describe this as a pretty small pointed pencil brush of medium density. The bristles do have some flexibility to them. Here it is next to the KC7 to show you a size comparison. The bristles appear to be the same length. Best uses are to deepen the crease, outer V, smudging out the lower lash line in a very blown out way. And for comparisons, the closest is the Z10. And you can see they're very similar, with the ferrule being identical in size to the Z10. I personally can't tell a difference while using these two. I don't think you need both, and I wish Chikuhodo had done something a little differently. I see it as a missed opportunity to include just a slightly different style of eyeshadow brush, as they were able to do with the face brushes. By making little small innovations, we got a very different brush, and I found that very welcoming, and I wish they had done something like that for Chikuhodo collectors that have a lot of these similar size pencil brushes. And then the last one is the F07. This one is more domed shape and blossoms out more. I don't reach for the 7 as often, the Silver Fox, because I do prefer a more pointed shape pencil brush. But I like all of these. They're just not this one's a little too big for me. Oops. Wow, I'm dropping all the brushes. That one's a little too big for me, and these two are just so similar that, knowing what I know now, I don't think I needed both of these. And then the last thing I want to compare it to are some pencil brushes by Chikuhodo or Hakuhodo. This is the G5558, and this one is the Hakuhodo G5524. These are also Kazan bristles, but they are very different. I'm including these only for size comparison purposes. As you can see, they're very different styles of brushes. The Hakuhodos are much more densely packed. The bristles don't have much movement, and they're such unique brushes, and they deserve their own video. So to conclude, I want to summarize my thoughts on the Honor series. I highly recommend it if you are a collector or everyday user who wants extremely luxurious brushes. For me personally, this series feels even more luxurious than the Z series, and both in terms of the handles and the hair type. If you're trying to decide between the Honor series and the Z series or FO series, I would say that if you want softer hair and more soft makeup application, or if you're just looking for the softest Squirrel brushes, I would go with the Honor series. I'm very impressed with the softness of these, the attention to detail with the engraved wood handles. The handles are slightly heavier. But then if you're trying to decide between the Honor series and the FO series, I can't help you much there because I really do love them both. I don't have a good answer. For me, they perform differently, so I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison. And the only thing I can say is that go with the FO series if you want more durability and intend to work over tacky finishes, and go with the Kazan series if you know you will work primarily with powder products. I do have a dedicated review on the FO series, so that might help guide your decision making. Lastly, a few pointers. I always recommend buying the brushes individually, especially because you don't save money by purchasing the entire set that includes a little storage pouch. You'll actually end up paying more if you purchase it with the set that includes the pouch. I also recommend starting with a few to test them for yourselves and to eventually build the set that works for your personal needs. All of these brushes are worth it to me, even the eyeshadow brushes that were a little redundant to other Z series brushes I own. Knowing what I know now, I do highly recommend all of them, and I would still purchase all of them for myself. But there were a few that were slightly more noteworthy than others. My top standout must-have favorites from the Kazan series are the KZ4, and that was the round pom-pom brush, cheek brush, the KZ3, which was the round candlelight shape brush, and also the KZ1 powder brush. But it's really hard to rank them because I do love the number 2 and the number 5. I'm very biased towards the face brushes, but I guess I can expect that from myself. If you have these, do let me know how you're liking them, how you're using them, and let's have a conversation in the comments. As always, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, and a friendly reminder to please say no to bluefin tuna. Thank you.